Hi, this is Major Gaurav and you're watching the Chanakya Dialogues English. Like, subscribe, and don't forget to press the bell icon so that you get the notification first. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Chanakya Dialogues. Recently, a statement coming out of Pakistan had India's strategic analysis in a tizzy. Pakistan said, the primary importance that we are attaching is to Jammu and Kashmir again becoming a state. Now, is this Pakistan wanting low-hanging fruits? Or is there a communication gap? What does Pakistan actually want in Jammu and Kashmir? Because it has seen failure after failure, at least on the face of it. I have a very important guest with me today, Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hasnain, former GOC, 15 Corps and currently Chancellor, Central University of Kashmir. Sir, Jai Hind and a very warm welcome, sir.
Jai Hind. Thank you, Gaurav.
Sir, Pakistan's statement recently saying that, we want statehood for J&K. Now, on the face of it, this does not seem to be extremely important because Mr. Amit Shah, the Home Minister, has already said that in due course, J&K will get statehood. Now, why would Pakistan reiterate something that Amit Shah has said?
Actually, Gaurav, this is something which has flummoxed me. And I personally think that the situation as it is in Jammu and Kashmir at the moment has actually flummoxed Pakistan. This is the first time I'm finding Pakistan without a sense of clarity at all about what is happening in Jammu and Kashmir, which direction is this whole issue going towards. Because I think the stated stance of Pakistan in the last year and a half has been that they would want to see Article 370 and 35A restored. That is status quo ante-restored, right? The issue of statehood has really not emerged in this. But I do agree, yes, the Pakistanis would probably have some stakes in trying to restore the complete status quo because they do not want to see anything disturbed in Jammu and Kashmir from the status which existed way back at the time of the partition. That's their stated stance because they want to take it to a situation where the United Nations can then be invited to come and intervene in the current situation as per the UN resolution which was passed in 1948-49. Now, this is their stance each time, and their strategy is this: how to make sure that despite the Shimla agreement in which the United Nations became absolutely irrelevant, how to ensure that India comes back towards the good old Karachi agreement, the good old UN resolution, to bring about a third-party resolution to look at a potential plebiscite, how to give relevance to the United Nations military observer group in India and Pakistan, the UNMOGIP, of which you are aware, how to bring that status back. And it is because of that that from time to time these awkward statements keep emerging. Earlier it was on Article 370 and 35A, and now this time it's suddenly on this issue of the statehood of Jammu and Kashmir, which to my mind is absolutely irrelevant, but obviously Pakistan has got some stakes in that.
So, do you also think that it's an issue of low-hanging fruits, sir? Because Pakistan needs to show something to its own population. Now, if I look at some sections of the Pakistani media, which I follow very closely, sir, there are people who are saying that ये दो नियाजी हैं, एक ने वेस्ट ईस्ट पाकिस्तान खो दिया था, दूसरे ने कश्मीर को, those sort of this thing, the niyazis of Mia Wali have always led Pakistan. So it's getting into that vicious cycle today. And they're also saying that Imran Khan will go down in history as the person who gave Jammu and Kashmir to Modi on a platter. What could have Imran Khan done, sir, if the Indian Parliament takes a decision, takes a call, apart from maybe diplomatic initiatives or maybe terrorism? There isn't pretty much that Pakistan could have done, sir.
See, Gaurav, there is a level of flippancy in the attitude of the Pakistan leadership. First of all, as you're aware, no one really knows who's in charge in Pakistan. Whether the current Niazi, Imran Khan Sahab, is actually fully in charge, or is it purely the army? We know who really is in charge in Pakistan. So statements coming out from there, you have to keep reading with the many inverted commas placed against them. To think that this is a low-hanging fruit, Well, the Pakistanis have also considered Siachen as a low-hanging fruit many times. They said that this can be resolved quite easily if we sit together across a table. Yes, they may have potentially looked at the restoration of statehood to Jammu and Kashmir to act as if they are the people who are actually sponsoring the welfare of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. That kind of an attitude, yes, you're absolutely right. That is a potential that they are looking at, a small achievement which can be shown potentially to the people in Jammu and Kashmir, to people in Pakistan itself, the people in Pakistan occupied Kashmir, and internationally perhaps get some brownie points for them. But at the end of it, I still feel there is no strategy at the moment that Pakistan has got. The 5th of August 2019 decisions put them into such a tizzy that they never expected it. A transformational kind of a decision which was taken by the government of India. They never thought that the Indian government will go to that extent, and that too so early. So they're still floundering. They're still floundering, looking for options here and there. And whenever they come across a potential option, they start talking about it without looking at the possibility of how far can they actually take it.
Sir, also the fact that when it comes to Kashmir, sir, sir, we've been talking before the recording started, we were talking about many issues about what has actually happened in Kashmir, how it blew up under our very noses, sir. That is what you said. They were flying under the radar and we did not come to know. And this entire thing of terrorism, first militancy and then terrorism started in Kashmir, and how thousands upon thousands lost their lives, and how it has managed to sort of unsettle this entire South Asian region, sir. Now, I would request you to go a little bit into the history of how Pakistan managed to do it, and suddenly this lack of momentum, this lack of kinetic energy, if I may say, in Pakistan, where everything for Pakistan today, given the momentum that they had earlier, sir, in the 80s and the early 90s, with the ferocity with which and the superior planning with which Pakistan went into quote-unquote battle in Kashmir, and the people, the center of gravity of the entire so-called Azadi movement and everything. So now suddenly they come to this floundering halt. They are confused, because that is what it looks to me, sir. If you can just take us through the history of the current...
This is a very, very interesting aspect, Gaurav, at the cost of what many people may actually accuse you and me of over-analyzing. But despite that, I think it's necessary for us to actually examine this aspect. I was recently in Jammu and Kashmir. A few days I spent there. And I spoke to a lot of people. I spoke particularly on the history of the proxy conflict, last 30 years. You know, we love joining the dots from events to events, elections which took place from time to time, major years in which terrorist skills were at a high and at a low, the turbulence on the streets when it started and when it ended, and things like that. But something which escapes our attention each time is the fact that from the late 80s, through the 90s and through the early part of the millennium, what Pakistan managed to achieve was an alignment of the faith, the ideological aspects of the faith of Jammu and Kashmir, Pakistan, and the Middle East, aligning them together into a more obscurantist kind of a belief. I am strongly of the belief that the typical ideology of Jammu and Kashmir, which was more tolerant, much more middle path, was never in the interest of Pakistan. It was far too close to the Indian syncretic culture, India's secularism, and as long as that remained, India would continue to rule the roost. So this is what an attempt was made, therefore, to change this complete ideology.
Sure.
And it happened over a period of 20 odd years. And I keep wondering, how is it that they succeeded in doing it? Many, many mosques changed hands in terms of the type of clergy who existed there, controlled those mosques, the type of messages which started coming out on Friday prayers. All this continued to happen under the intelligence agencies, under the army, under the police, under the political authority, everyone. No one really paid attention to it. Or maybe people paid attention to it, never spoke about it. We in the armed forces, in the army, never ever drew our attention to it, brought any focus to it. And suddenly it hit us after many years. And we realized, my God, this is what has happened. And we asked ourselves, how did we allow this to happen? And the simple answer is, we never studied this conflict from a 360-degree angle. We only looked at it primarily from a kinetic angle. If you look at it from a 360-degree angle and you see that it is actually a very, very intense form of hybrid conflict, then our answers or responses would have been slightly different.
Yes, sir.
So I am left to believe, is something like this happening today? That all this aspect of which we are looking at, that Pakistan doesn't have a full understanding of the situation in Jammu and Kashmir, do we look at it from a flippant attitude from our side too and say, yeah, we got the better of Pakistan completely and Pakistan is floundering, they don't have any idea of how to evolve a strategy to calibrate the situation in Jammu and Kashmir and bring it back to what it existed before the 5th of August? Is there something actually happening under the canvas, under the radar, which we are not being able to put our finger on? Once more, exactly. See, today the army is doing a tremendous job of outreach once again. You have been in Jammu and Kashmir recently. I think you went to Handwara and you saw that one day with the company commander and these kind of events which are happening, marvelously put together, everything, right? And it's going to achieve a lot, because a lot of people spoke to me about this, and I met a lot of young Kashmiris who are there. Minds are changing. But at the same time, I cannot completely believe that the Pakistanis don't have a strategy at this time. There is something which I am not being able to put my finger to. And that is what keeps me all the time very inquisitive to see what else could be happening there.
So China seems to have, at least for the now, sir, we are not talking long term here, extremely short term, China seems to have, for strategic reasons, taken a step back. China never openly commented on Kashmir except inane, bland statements saying that you should work together for the greater peace of the area, etc., etc. Now, sir, there is a sensing inside Pakistan that China has. They use the word Ashirwad very often, sir, in their media, sir. China ne ab Ashirwad piche le liya. Is it true that because the Kashmir card will always be a handle to beat India with as far as China is concerned, and they will use Pakistan to do it? I don't see how the Chinese can absolutely throw away the Kashmir card. It's a very important card even for the Chinese, sir.
Very true. If you have to learn anything from the Chinese, it is the art of calibration. They have calibrated their approach to the Himalayan region, India, South Asia as such. I would say marvelously they have calibrated it from a high-end coercive kind of an attitude towards complete cooperation with India, becoming a part of BRICS, and you'll probably find that Mr. Xi Jinping will be in India in the month of September, October sometime in one of these summits, and restoration of bonhomie between the two, and suddenly everything breaking down again. Now this is probably a part of the calibrated strategy which China follows as far as the South Asian subcontinent is concerned. But on Pakistan specifically, I would say that I think China probably looked at these events since April, May last year as having probably achieved their intent of sending home the message that a intense two and a half front scenario for India could exist in the future.
Sure.
It was not necessary to press home anything. At this time, it was sufficient only to coerce and hope to be able to get India careful, to become more careful. Perhaps the intention also was not to force India too deep into the Quad or into the American fold. And with what's happened yesterday evening or last few days with the Quad summit, virtual summit, maybe China may have overplayed itself. Actually, it's pushed India completely into the Quad, and India is looking at itself as an effective member of the Quad, something it was not looking at before April, May of last year, right? So we still can't say that the Chinese have succeeded in doing what they're doing, but they're definitely being careful about it. They know that Quad Plus, and France was also yesterday on board. There are more countries likely to come in. It may be a complete movement of democratic, like-minded nations looking at the entire Indo-Pacific and preventing a Chinese coercion, a Chinese dominance of the area of the South China Sea, the East China Sea, and the Pacific as such, the Indo-Pacific as such. So, at the end of the day, I think the Chinese are they're feeling awkward about this entire thing. It's not as if they're making the right decisions. Pakistan is definitely a very, very important nation for them because that's the access that they get to the Northwest Indian Ocean through Pakistan. But I think with Pakistan also they've realized that they need to play a little bit of cat and mouse, black and white from time to time. Not look at Pakistan as if Pakistan is completely in the Chinese fold. They need to calibrate their policy towards Pakistan from time to time so that the Pakistanis who are equally within the realm of possibility of moving into the American fold, if with the Afghanistan situation, the way it is building up at the moment, it is important for the Chinese to continue playing this game to make sure that Pakistan is at the end of the game still remains a part of the Chinese strategy. So you will find much more of this in the near future, I think. You will find something good, something bad happening between, as far as China is concerned, looking at Pakistan. You are aware of the internal dynamics of Pakistan as to how the Chinese are not very popular within Pakistan. Sure. Socially, they are not very popular. Although Pakistan may be very grateful, thankful about the fact that they have been bailed out by China from time to time, right? But this relationship is really not such a transformational relationship, although they keep calling their relationship as deeper than the oceans and higher than the skies and things like that.
Sweeter than honey, sir.
Sweeter than honey. These are all the kind of things which keep happening to try and paint a very rosy picture. But I think under the canvas, there's much more happening.
Sir, my last question to you, sir. Do you think this entire issue of hybrid warfare, you keep on speaking so passionately about hybrid warfare, sir. Now, I would not venture to say that the days of kinetic operations are over. But yes, a measured approach is called for in Kashmir, sir. What do you think is going to be Pakistan's game plan in the coming future, sir, let's say between 3 to 5 years? And what are the geopolitical incidents or the positioning of the countries? You mentioned Quad, sir, which is very important and all that. Will they have an indirect, at least, if not direct, role to play in what is happening in Kashmir and what Pakistan is doing in Kashmir, sir?
Let's start from Kashmir and flow outwards to have a look at this larger issue. 3 to 5 years in Kashmir. I'm glad that you asked this question because this is the question a lot of people in the valley in Kashmir were also asking me. And this is the first time I'm coming across this question to me because mostly the Indian attitude, as you're aware, our attitude, all of us, has been to look at this in 6 months durations. What is the summer, what is going to be, what is the winter going to be? And I'm almost always tempted to respond by saying, okay, this summer the situation will be something like this and the winter the situation will be something like this. But I'm glad you asked me on a 5-year bracket. 3 to 5 year bracket, I think it's starting. Pakistan will probably look at this as a fresh situation because it seems that from all directions, political, economic, social, diplomatic, and military, all the domains with which we look at a situation of this nature, in all domains, the Pakistanis seem to be on the back foot. Militarily, we have got the better of them. We've got good control taking place at the moment in Kashmir. Socially, a lot of things are happening where the Kashmiri youth seems to be coming on board, although not majorly in any way, but we are looking towards that. Economically, definitely with the Union Territory status and with governance, with the Lieutenant Governor being very, very proactive at the moment, a lot of new measures, new things are happening in Kashmir. Politically is one field where not too much is happening, despite the fact that we've recently had the elections there. And lastly, I would say diplomatically, we seem to be on a high completely because the world is generally believing the Indian narrative. So on all counts, this situation needs to be perhaps taken by the throat by the Pakistanis completely and looked at afresh. Otherwise, they would have lost the game. I would say that on the military front, they realize that not too much can be done. not too much can be done in terms of infiltration or the networks which are existing, etc. What the area which things can happen is the alienation. Continue retaining the alienation. As long as the alienation in the mind of the Kashmiri remains, the potential of retaining this kind of a status over the next 5-10 years remains alive.
Sir.
Otherwise, the Indian state, with this better economy, with this outreach and realization today, will outmaneuver the Pakistanis completely in the next few years. So I think the battle of the mind is something which the Pakistanis are going to focus upon in a very big way. Although a lot of people will think that perhaps a bounce back on the kinetic front, a major event taking place in a major kinetic event taking place somewhere in the Kashmir Valley to draw back attention of the world, to draw back attention of the local populace and tell them that we are still with you, that kind of a thing can happen. To my mind, the chances of that happening are less, although I don't rule that out.
Sure.
The possibility of that can happen in the next 2-3 years, anytime, to try and retract the situation to themselves. Otherwise, the Pakistanis, I think, to my mind, with the situation that exists internally within Pakistan, will have to focus internally much more. Otherwise, if they don't and they keep looking at Afghanistan and Kashmir all the time and attempting to do things there which are not really within their control, things internally may once again break down, which was what happened in 2014, 15, 16 when they were forced to launch Operation Zarb-e-Azb, if you remember.
Yes, sir.
So this is something that they have to be careful of. And I'm sure a person like General Bajwa, who has a fairly good strategic mind, is fully mindful of. And one of the reasons why the ceasefire offer and this whole issue of the ceasefire came is potentially because of this input. So I've spoken about the aspects of Kashmir. Now when it comes to the larger dynamics of the subcontinent, national security of the subcontinent, what Pakistan is definitely looking for, if at all, after the ceasefire is, can the situation be taken to such an extent where the SAARC summit, which has been postponed and postponed, which was to be held in Islamabad, if you remember, in 2015-16 sometime, can that summit come back and be held in Islamabad? That will restore Pakistan's political diplomatic status in South Asia once again. And the potential of an economic upturn in terms of trade, etc., if they want to actually continue this relationship with India of trying to keep it stable, then this is what the Pakistanis should be looking at. The potential of SAARC becoming a vehicle for growth, for economic advancement, etc. Can this be done? This is the million-dollar question. Will India permit it? Will India actually encourage this? To my mind, if the situation in Kashmir remains stable, and Pakistan is seen to be behaving itself over a period of time, I don't see any reason why India will not accept this kind of a situation. It helps in stabilizing Pakistan, which is what is one of the intents of India too, although a lot of people think that keeping Pakistan completely unstable is in India's interest. I tend to disagree with that. So I think the regional approach of bringing other countries, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Myanmar on board, and promoting SAARC as a vehicle for growth, provided things in Jammu and Kashmir are good, will be in India's interest, and this is something that we will probably promote and encourage. And given 1 or 2, 3 years of this kind of stability, I don't rule out completely the return of a peace process. But as I said again, it is subject entirely to what the situation in Jammu and Kashmir is going to be in the next few years.
Thank you very much for talking to us, sir. It was indeed a pleasure and
Thank
a privilege. Friends, with Lieutenant General Syed Ata Hasnain, we spoke about Pakistan's surprising demand for a restoration of statehood for Jammu and Kashmir. Then the General also spoke about hybrid warfare in Kashmir and the larger aspect of the Quad, and what is happening in and around South Asia and how countries are joining in to possibly counter China, what kind of impact it will have on the situation in Jammu and Kashmir. Thank you for joining us. I'll see you again next week with another special guest. Till then, from my team and I here at the Chanakya Dialogues, Jai Hind.